Welcome back to another episode of the Patio Pondering Podcast, where we're after clear thinking in complex agriculture. Agriculture is a system, especially when we look at the pork industry. We talk about production, nutrition, policy, but those pieces don't always connect as cleanly as we'd like, especially when real-world decisions are involved. Today's guest is Lori Stevermer, a hog farmer from southern Minnesota who spent her entire career in the feed industry and working to promote the pork industry through leadership roles in state and national commodity groups. Lori, we go back to our Hubbard days. It was 19 years ago this month we started working together. But your past since, from nutrition to the farm to leading at NPPC, have given you perspective across a whole system. So welcome to the patio, Lori.
Well, thank you for having me. And I was trying to remember how long it had been since we started working together. And goodness, 19 years. That time flies, doesn't it?
In those 19 years, we both became grandparents. We've seen a lot of pigs slaughtered, and we've seen a whole bunch of black swan events.
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely.
Well, Lori, to start off, when you connect your time in nutrition at Wayne Feeds, Hubbard, and now Alltech, and your work at NPPC, where do things not line up as neatly as we'd like to think they do? And what about that gives you a little pause as you think about the pork industry?
Well, as I look at my career in the nutrition business and my involvement in NPPC, I would actually think they line up fairly well. At least I always felt they lined up fairly well. The work in the feed industry, the opportunity to see different farms and operations and challenges always did help me get a better perspective on what the work that NPPC did. If there was an area where I say there maybe was an alignment, I would say that a lot of producers, and I think a lot of industry people, just maybe don't understand what a trade association like NPPC does and the work they do. So, how does it affect them? Why are you working on those policies? Why do we worry about, ingredients and what China's doing? Although I think the feed industry understands that to some degree, but I think it's that the feed industry maybe doesn't always understand the policy side of it and all the dynamics that happen at a federal level. And why it affects them in the feed industry.
Where do you see clarity show up in your involvement with NPPC and helping the industry as a whole understand where pork sits?
I would say there's a couple areas that we see clarity in the industry. In those examples, and we have some, I think especially some ingredient challenges, right? Sourcing, tariffs, disruptions. We may have had it in the past because of a concern with the disease, but, earlier this year, the concerns with tariffs and the costs, I think then all of a sudden the industry is like, oh, this is a policy situation. I think when we have disruptions to our farms, in the packing and processing due to a labor situation, and then they're understanding maybe why NPPC is advocating for labor, H-2A year rounds, things like that. So some of those situations like that kind of directly impact the nutrition industry and then I think give them a little better line of sight on what's going on.
As you think about the producers you've worked with on the feed side, the producers you worked with, and the suppliers on the NPPC side, if you take a step back, are there messages that we should be sending better to the consumer, or are there messages we're doing a good job of sending?
I chuckle because consumers we're all consumers, right? I said this at a group I was at a month ago. Less than 2% of us are farmers, but all of us eat, right? So we are all consumers and we all have an opinion. And so I think the messaging gets challenging, but I think when we look as an industry, whether we're a producer, we're allied industry or what, consumers need to have confidence in what we do. And I think there's times where confidence is lacking. And yes, there's going to be situations where something doesn't go right, but I think consumers need to have confidence in their food system. Especially when you talk to some of our staff that goes around the world, has worked with FAS or FSIS and seen food systems in other countries, we really have a really gold standard food system. And that's why that's getting written into some of the trade deals that we're doing now, is that these other countries accept our food systems and our oversight and our inspection. I would say the other thing that we need to message to consumers is that choice is okay. Choice is great. And choice means there's different types of production systems. From a large system that can deliver product to a big box retailer that allows people to buy protein very economically, to the ability to go into more of a specialty grocery store with maybe a niche marketing or lots of claims on the label, to being able to buy from your local, farmer's market. That choice is great. And we have producers that fit all of those different choices. And we shouldn't let those options divide us as an industry, or consumers shouldn't make us pit one against the other, right? We shouldn't pit large against niche. There's room for both. And certainly in my feed career, I've worked with all of them, from a Nyman ranch to a large system. And so I think that's a message also that we need to get to consumers, that it's okay to have options and choices. That's a good thing. And as producers, we'll adapt.
How do we as an industry promote that choice when the commodity cheap protein is the predominant source of checkoff funds?
Yeah, and now you're in the checkoff world, which I was on the voluntary side. So I want to make sure we make that distinction. And
well, we can just talk about promotion in general.
Yeah, let's just talk. I mean, I understand, and I have heard that comment where a niche producer will say, well, my checkoff dollars only support, the large farms. But I will say, and I will step into the pork board world, with their new campaign and Taste What Pork Can Do, that can fit all size and shapes of retailers and distributors. And I was at a meeting last fall where there was it was a retailer advisory council that was there. And so you had, direct to consumer people there versus the large ones. And so when they looked at that messaging and their ability to get people excited about pork, that fit them. So that's one specific example of how this new campaign and checkoff dollars is creating an interest and awareness in pork that's going to go across different sizes of farms and distributors, and also I would say different ethnic groups also. I think the other thing your checkoff dollars do is programs that can benefit producers of all sizes. I think of a We Care program or things like that. So, I think there's more there once you get the chance to just talk through it.
I love your reference to us working with those producers in our feed industry role, whether it's the Comparts or the work I did at Kent with the Berkshire program. Do you think that the havoc that COVID caused actually put our industry in a better position to understand choice?
I do believe it did help our industry, and I believe it helped us connect with some consumers. I will also flip it and say that consumers probably got a better look at their food system, and people often said it's broken. See, this is why our food system's broken. And it's like, no, it's not broken. I mean, we are very efficient at getting a hog to market and getting that carcass broken down and out to the store. I mean, that's quality, that's freshness. But, and COVID broke that, right, when our processing plants were down. But it also helped people make connections to local farmers and local butcher shops. And that's important too. And that's an area that's growing, as people want to connect with their food. So I do think it was beneficial, for both farmers and consumers.
It's growing, but it's not going to take over commodity pork.
It's not, and it probably can't, because when you have the population start to center in large cities like it does, you need to have a way to get large volumes of pork to a city, but yet even within a city there might be smaller niche markets. But I think that's just kind of the way our food system is. And if you go back and just look at the history of our country and how we populated the U.S., and then all of a sudden we started to, industrialization came along. We moved to cities, and hey, I don't have to farm now because you can farm for me, so I can move to the city and do something else. And part of it is just this whole larger discussion on how American agriculture has changed through our almost 250 years now.
That's right. Well, think about the television show you and I watched as children that is based not too far from where you live. And Carolyn Ingalls brought her eggs into Mrs. Olson, got screwed because Mrs. Olson was a not nice business person. But that was the beginning of an integrated food system.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's interesting where we find these little lessons.
Yeah, and how things do repeat themselves. But I think it's great. I hope. I mean, we use we're fortunate. We have a local butcher in town here. 4 or 5 miles from us. We take our pigs there. I love his meat sticks, and I think we're fortunate. And he serves a great role for the area. I mean, he provides meat to some local restaurants and some food trucks, which I think is really great. Is he going to be able to take care of the city of Mankato? No, but there's, once again, that choice and that options is really important.
I agree. Our choice has increased, and I don't know if it's just because of COVID. Is it social media? Is it, people seeing videos on TikTok about, carnitas at this food truck, and that changes your attitude. But I think the acceptance of choice has changed in our industry the last decade.
Yeah, I agree, and I would hope that through time, and I believe this has happened, we as producers have gotten more accepting of each other's different production practices. So it's not just, hey, I do this and you do something that's different, and that's not right. I think we've come to have a better understanding, and I would say a good example of that, and this is a slightly different topic, but a few years ago when we went through, and Dr. Anna Forseth from NPPC was putting together the traceability standards that we needed to get in place for ASF. And she did a good job of bringing together producers of all sizes. And everybody right away was thinking like, oh, those show pig producers, they're the ones that carry disease all over. And, we got to watch out for them. But when you actually started to listen to what they do and the tracking that they had to do from show to show, now not a perfect system, but the fact that they have to check in, the veterinary oversight. And there were a lot of people that were shaking their head going, I didn't realize that there was that much oversight. And that, that type of thing was happening. Now, once again, nobody's perfect, big or small, but there were a lot of heads in that room of some larger producers that were saying, oh, this is helpful. I've got a different perspective of the show pig industry. So I think that's a positive example.
Okay, let's pull on that thread at the hem of that skirt. Do you think that the U.S. producer understands how fortunate we are when we compare to other systems when it comes to disease pressure, safety, promotion of the industry?
I believe for the most part they do. And once again, it might be the little bubble that I've been in the last 7-8 years with leadership. But when you get examples of other countries and what they have to go through, or the kind of the lack of oversight, I think that's a realization. I know a few years ago at NPIC, there was a gentleman from Germany that talked about their industry and some things. And I think a lot of people walked out of that room saying, yeah, we're glad we're in the U.S. So I would say overall, yeah, we do.
The very last farm visit I made in China a month and a half ago, this farm was transitioning from 8,000 pigs farrow to finish one side to feeding wean to finish. And in this province, by mandate of the Communist Party, they have to have 2 million sows worth of production. By mandate. It's a hotbed for ASF. But they're mandated that they have to have these sows. Now, if that was the United States and we had an ASF outbreak in Washington County, Iowa, we'd move south to North Dakota.
Yeah.
The Chinese producer in this case is fighting mandates, fighting ASF, and I heard after I left that now that same province is dealing with foot and mouth disease. We're so fortunate we don't have to deal with those two. One of those two would be devastating, but two of them?
Yeah, absolutely.
It put PRRS in perspective. I mean, PRRS sucks.
Yeah.
but it's not ASF.
Right. And we have options and flexibility, and not, we feel like we have a lot of regulations, and we do, but it could be worse. Yeah. And you just cited an example, which is worse.
On the other side, it is really good that we have varied production. And I talked to Sean Haney from Real Agriculture in Canada last week. And we talked about the integration of the United States or North America. Mm-hmm. And when we think about our industry, you take pigs from Manitoba, you feed them in South Dakota, Iowa, we take them and butcher them, whatever packing plant. And some of that stuff that we don't eat here, we send to Mexico.
Yeah.
You think about bungholes and tripe and ears and things like that. It's nice that we have these options that we can utilize more of the carcass with people that have different tastes than we do. Yeah,
and that's a great example, and I would say that's one thing that's been frustrating over the last few years. When we talk a lot about tariffs or the U.S. and we look at someone like Canada that is a good partner in a couple ways, as you referenced. We bring wean pigs in, we grow them here, they might be harvested here, they might go back to Canada as pork. We send a lot of pork to Mexico. We are a fluid an industry in terms of production, and we've had a lot of discussions as a part of our trilateral meetings on biosecurity and ASF, and what are we doing here in the U.S.? What's Canada doing? What's Mexico doing? And then Mexico looks to their southern border, and what are they doing? And so there's a good realization, for certain at a board level, and we hope that we can communicate that out to our members that we are a North American industry in a sense. Now I know we're still the U.S., but there are our partners in Canada and in Mexico are very key. And China takes a lot of things that we don't like to eat. And we hope that Vietnam can take more of those things that we don't eat. And so that's why having trade and being able to get more value out of those parts of the pig that we don't eat is really key.
Mm-hmm. Those discussions that you had with Canada, your partners in Canada and Mexico, did the information from those discussions move up the ladder through USDA and maybe help some negotiations somehow?
I would say in a general way, we talk about, like whether, I would say our visit as officers with Secretary Rollins, when we talk about the importance of Mexico and their purchase of product from us, got that way. I know that our staff, whenever possible, tries to talk about our relationship with Canada. I think, one specific example would be the product of the U.S. label. And while certain industries might really like that, for us in pork, for the reason you stated earlier, it's a bit of a challenge at times, right? And especially when you look at, Minnesota here, or Iowa, or maybe Indiana a little bit. Some of these states that border or are close to Canada where those pigs come down, and now all of a sudden, we're worried about labels. We got packing plants that might only take Canadian pigs on certain days. And so definitely we try to get that type of messaging to the administration and government to say, oh, whoa, here's something that you may not have considered.
Well, in that case, it's good that we have commodity organizations, whether it's checkoff funded like the National Pork Board or voluntary funded like the NPPC, to send some of those messages that an Undersecretary of Agriculture might not have any idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's what we're there for, to do a lot of those things that producers might not regularly think of, top of mind. We think of the big things, trade and disease, which is key. but labeling and, making sure that other countries accept our export certificates so that product can go somewhere, and doesn't get caught on the water. Just little things like that, which are actually big things. I shouldn't say little, big things like that, but kind of fly under the radar.
Well, and there's so many things that we don't understand as we have a more international trade. And my son worked for an Australian company that imported lamb into the United States, and he worked in logistics. When we had the longstormers strike in Philadelphia, it backed him up. So he was on the phone with the warehouse, he was on the phone with the dock, he was on the phone with the truck, with the shipping companies, like, okay, where's this container? Where's this ship? How many days out from a supply standpoint? But more so, when does that freezer run out of energy?
Yeah.
Like I got 14 days of propane in that thing, and you say it's going to be 21 days before you hit the dock? That could be bad for me. So think about that.
Could be a problem.
Aside from one 20-foot container to how many millions of pounds of pork that goes across the sea.
Yeah. Yeah, those ports and the strikes that have happened in the past, or potential strikes and shutdowns, I mean, that affects a lot of industries, whether it's, pork or lamb or, whatever else is importing or exporting through those. And I think, a lot of us, we don't realize all the details about an industry unless you're in it, right? And that's, on one hand, you get frustrated, right? Like, why don't people understand this more? And but on the other hand, you can't know everything, right? I don't know everything about a specific industry. There's certain things I just have to trust, right? And, we hope that our trust is well placed, but you can't know everything. So I think that's where you have to rely on people that maybe you do trust to help you with the situation, and just, focus your energies. Otherwise, I think you would just drive yourself crazy.
Yeah. We use the term slat level in our industry every day.
Yeah.
Lori, at the slat level, we understand this. And at the slat level, the people do this. But I think what we're talking about, it'd be nice if people just understood what it was like driving past the farm at 50 miles an hour.
Yeah. And it's, good to have those conversations with people. And we do have, opportunities to do that, whether it's state fairs or podcasts or, interactions. And it's always a reminder that we need to speak on their level, right? We get really technical, really fast, but it was a couple years ago at the Minnesota State Fair. I was working in the oink booth, and this lady comes up to me with kind of this worried look on her face. She kind of leans in and she goes, "Is pork safe to eat?" And I'm like, "Tell me more. Why do you say that?" She goes, "Well, my friends say I need to buy this kind of pork, and somebody else says I need to do this." And her basic question, because I was thinking, oh, she's going to need some explanation on antibiotics or all this production practices. It goes back to the choice thing. She was so overwhelmed by what her friends were telling her, what she was reading. And, at the end of the day, she just wanted to know if pork was safe. Like, can I just buy it from my family? Because I just need to. And so that's where, once again, the choice can get confusing. I could have gone real in depth and explained things at a slat level. All she wanted to know was at a high level, yes, pork is safe. It's all inspected, and there's different types of pork production systems, but it's safe. Boom. It was good.
Great service to the industry, Lori.
That's what I do.
There you go. Well, we got kind of deep into the pork industry, and I intended that, but let's turn just a little bit. And Lori, I know that running is really important to your family.
Yeah.
When you're out running on the gravel road there outside Mankato and preparing, say, for a 5K, maybe a pork run, what thoughts tend to go through your brain?
All kinds of thoughts. That's the nice thing about running or exercise. It just, I don't know if it's an additional oxygen going in or out or what, but it allows just some creative free thinking, right? Maybe it's a situation with a family member that I'm just thinking through. Maybe it's, especially when I was giving a lot of interviews and stuff, maybe it was the opportunity to just kind of think through some talking points. Maybe it's just some personal things, but it's, it really is just kind of an opportunity to just let your mind flow and go.
Do you think we in agriculture promote or allow ourselves to just let our brain flow and go?
Ooh, great question. Great question. We don't do it enough. My experience is that we in agriculture are wired to be doers and fixers. So we have to be doing and fixing. I will admit that's one of my characteristics, right? I don't let my mind go enough and just allow that free thinking. And certainly running, biking, walking helps with that. But I don't think we do that enough. I do believe there's a little more realization now that that's beneficial. And so people are trying to carve out time, whether we call that journaling, whether we call it whatever. But I don't think we allow ourselves enough of it.
Mm-hmm. While we're off the pork industry, it's 2026. You've been involved in the feed industry for many decades. Do you feel your gender has anything to do with your promotional activity or where you've been in 2026?
Do I feel like my gender has anything to do with where I'm at in 2026?
Mm-hmm.
Do you mean in a positive way, a negative way, or either?
Yes.
That is an interesting question. And the first answer in my head is no. And I look back and I got involved. I mean, I grew up on a farm. I was a farm kid, tomboy, all of that. I just got involved with agriculture and the feed business because my brother was going to be back at the farm. And that's how I got involved with the feed business. And back in the day, yeah, there weren't too many women, but it was just something I did and loved and stayed involved with it. I would say through the years, some of my tendencies, whether that's the collaborative nature that I have, the ability to, get input from others, have helped me in certain roles. I heard a lot of that as my year as president, that people appreciated that. But I think that's more of an attribute. I think I got to where I'm at because of who I am, not necessarily the gender that I was at. I think, once again, having parents as good role models that got involved with industries and in boards and service and, a love of agriculture and people tapping me on the shoulder saying, hey, you should run for this board. You should consider an officer. Those are the kind of things that kept moving me along the way. In my career in the feed business, I think staying adaptable, having a good team to work around, being willing to make changes, being fortunate that the changes that I was able to make through different companies and different roles weren't precluded on my ability to move because the farm doesn't move that well. So I feel really lucky there that all the opportunities I had, whether it was through Wayne Feeds, Hubbard Feeds, or now Alltech, allowed me to continue to stay on the farm. Mm-hmm. So some luck had to do with it too, I think.
Well, luck is where preparation and opportunity meet, right?
Well, that's true. Mm-hmm. That's true.
Yeah. I don't think you would have been NPPC president in 1989. But
there have been women presidents before me for NPPC, so I wasn't the first. But it's interesting you say that.
But our society has evolved, and agriculture is slowly catching up.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we do have NPPC presidents that were female in the past through probably more around the 2000s and that. It's interesting, though, we've talked about it as a board and certainly as officers and presidents. It's interesting how the right person appears at the right time for president. And it's not like it's just like, okay, you go be president now. It's you start out as vice president, then president-elect, and then president. So it's a rotation, but whether it's divine intervention or just, luck, I mean, you look at certain presidents and the times that they were going through, and you're like, oh, yeah, that was the right person for the right time. So
it's interesting how that works out.
Yeah.
Whether it's the rain at the right time in August, or the sun comes out and you can make hay, or Lori comes in to be president because she fits. Isn't that interesting how that works?
Yeah.
So last week we did a wilderness first aid training for my Boy Scouts. Mm-hmm. And our leader does a really good job with the youth. He had an icebreaker, and you and I have been around enough icebreakers that first thing I was like, oh God, not this. And then he got to his, tell me your name, what you've done, why you're here, and tell me the most unique food. And I just got back from China, and I'm going to win this one. So going around the room, and you've got kids saying, I had elk and I had scallops. I'm going, scallops is not weird. And it got to me, and I shared what I ate, and it was pig stomach, pig ears, and a piece of a cow that we would never eat. And I thought back to what we talked about earlier about how we need international trade.
Mm-hmm.
And we need China. Not because they're going to buy 500 million bushels of soybeans, or they're going to buy 500 million tons of pork. But we need China and Vietnam and Mexico because they eat stuff that we won't eat.
Right. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
How did that play into your work at NPPC with the voluntary funding and promoting from a national policy level?
Well, it's why we continue to seek trade agreements with countries like Vietnam or, Southeast Asia. And, China's big. China will always be big. And it's great to send the offal there. I mean, it's probably worth $68 a pig, depending on the market and time. But, when disruptions happen there, then you have to look at other countries. And so, so we have worked hard on that. And, our international team works with the undersecretary to say, these are the trade agreements we need. This is the countries. This is why. Getting them to recognize, once again, some of our inspection standards, getting them to recognize the MRLs for ractopamine, and even though nobody's using it anymore. So all of those type of things go into that policy work to create those trade agreements so that we can work with those countries. Now, most other countries are trying to protect their domestic production, right? So it's not just a done deal, right? Well, we can see that, but the continued work and to show the value of those countries that might not be obvious right away, I mean, is a big part of what our team does.
So the U.S. pork industry is looking pretty good today. We got $100 hogs. The sow herd seems to be fairly right-sized for our productivity. The profitability looks like it could last for 12 months, or at least a rolling 12 months looks pretty good. What concerns do you have about the next 24 months?
We are in a fortunate spot with the pork industry. Like you said, we've got some profitability. We have our disease challenges. I would say, a couple of things probably concern me. Part of our profitability is the fact that grain prices are low, and, certainly want grain farmers to make money. A lot of our pig producers are also grain farmers, right? So we need them to make money. But I think when we look at situations, and this may be controversial, but like an E15 or the 45Z, some regulations that can maybe give one industry an advantage over the another would be concerning, right? And so I think that's just where we want a level-headed approach to all. And I understand the importance of E15. I'm not saying that. So all my corn farmer friends out there, just relax. But yeah. I think some of us in the pork industry go back to the ethanol wars area, right? And so when one industry gets an artificial advantage over another, and then something happens, a drought year and there's no corn or there's less corn, then you're pitting one industry against another, and that's never good. I would say USMCA is coming up for renewal, right? And there's discussions going on now, and we talked earlier about how good North America has worked together, and especially in terms of the pork industry and the flow back and forth. Certainly, want to, at least from a pork aspect, keep that going the way it is, because any type of disruption there, if Mexico doesn't want to take as much pork, or we can't bring pigs in from Canada, whatever the scenario, that could really harm our industry. I would say the third thing that when I look at the pork industry that could really kind of disrupt us is labor and the labor shortage. And, we've gone through challenges with getting TNs approved. It's better now, but, whether it's on our farms or in our packing plants, we need labor. We need foreign-born labor. We know in the rural areas, there's not as many of us. There's, and the U.S. in general is in a population trough. So that ability to get labor to run our farms and run our packing plants is really key.
Because like it or not, the children of the people that are doing those jobs aren't going to do the jobs their parents did, because they're going to be no different than our great-grandparents. Like, go to town, don't work on a farm.
Yeah, every generation's like that. I want you to have a better life than I did, so go do this or don't do that. And that's part of it. And I mean, we talked about the show industry earlier, and there's a lot of kids in that industry that just have a passion for animals, and they're going to come back. And I would say that farms and industry, farmers are realizing, hey, these are people that we should take a look at and not just overlook. But still with those kids coming back, whether it's in the pork industry or beef industry, we're still going to need more labor. So, and especially in our packing plants.
Automation is going to help a little bit. It's not going to eliminate the challenge.
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
So as we talked about coordination, whether it's USMCA and getting pigs from Saskatchewan to northern Iowa, how have you been able to maintain a massive travel schedule, a work schedule, and still help Dale there around the farm?
Well, I would say two things. Number one, I do have a very loving and supportive husband who is also fairly self-sufficient. So when I traveled a lot, he was supportive of that and, was able to take care of himself. We didn't have kids at home, right? It would have been a totally different deal if I had kids in high school. And that's part of the reason why I planned the way I did. I didn't want to have that choice between, somebody's football game or, cross-country run and a trip to Washington, D.C. So I think the family life and the support of my husband, Dale, was tremendous. I would also say that Alltech and Hubbard Feeds were very supportive also, and they understood what a benefit it was to me and also to the pork industry and to Alltech to have me enrolled in this journey on the board and as president. So they were very understanding, maybe didn't dump a lot of projects on me. If I couldn't make a meeting, they were understanding. So having that support at work was really key. I would say the third thing that maybe doesn't get mentioned enough, I just had to realize I wasn't going to make everything, right? And so, especially at work when I tend to be the organizer that kind of keeps the teams moving along, or I'm the one that, once again, collaborating is one of my strengths, and I want to know, how's this working? I had to realize that there was some meetings I wasn't going to be part of, and because of that, things were going to move ahead without me, which was good. It needed to. It couldn't delay, but there was going to be times when I was not going to be totally up to speed on a topic or a situation. And that happened, and I had to be okay with that. Like, okay, can you get me up to speed? Or I feel half a step behind this. And you had to be okay with that. So
after working with you for almost 6 years, I understand that your involvement is not a It's not a controlling. It's a, I can help. I want to help. Your realization that you couldn't help everybody or couldn't be participating, that had to take a deep dive. How did you finally come to that realization that you couldn't help everybody and you needed to say no or be comfortable that you couldn't help everybody?
It was hard, and especially as our pork team was coming together in Alltech, and we were, switching some roles around, and there's always the fear that if I give up this, what else am I doing in exchange? Will I still provide value? And it really was just saying, I'm not going to make every meeting. You guys are going to have to go ahead. I'm not going to go and know everything. And probably at the same time, things were ramping up on the NPPC side. There was Farm Bill. There were all these other issues that just started, taking up space in my brain. And whether it's the meetings I was traveling to or the number of times of the week that I talked to Brian for an hour or two because something was happening on the hill or somewhere else, that definitely, I don't know. I just had to accept it and go with it. On the flip side, after not being president and moving into a past president role and not having all those calls, all of a sudden it's like, it's a bit of an adjustment. And we talk about that as officers too, because you are so involved. You have such a level of knowledge. You're making decisions, and then all of a sudden it's like, that's not my decision to make anymore. Which is okay. That's the nature of the roles. But then you're like, okay, I'm not getting those calls anymore. So now it's adjusting back the other way.
It seems to me that when you went from all the work at Alltech and transitioned to NPPC, the level of activity in your brain stayed constant. You just substituted. This went down and the other one went up. When you became a past officer, this went down. So your brain activity probably reduced overall because you didn't have all this NPPC to keep you full.
Yeah.
Was there some loneliness, some grief about that, or just acceptance?
I wouldn't call it loneliness or grief. It is an acceptance, and it's adjustment. Like I said, when you are talking with Brian routinely and about things, and then all of a sudden you're not. It's like, oh yeah, I wonder. Yeah, I don't have to think about that, and but it's okay too, but you have to learn for it to be okay. And yes, the adjustments change, and I'm off the board now. I got off the board in March. My time was up. My role as past president was up. I will say I've been doing a lot of cleaning around the yard and the house. So I have focused my energies on other things, but it was stuff that needed to be done. And, and it's the opportunity to, I'm going to meet my daughter this weekend in La Crosse, and just for mother-daughter weekend. The ability to do those things, which it would have been harder, being on the board and being, all with Alltech, that would have been harder. So adjusting and then being intentful about looking for other opportunities. I've also tried to spend a little more of my brain power thinking about, and I don't know if I like the term mentoring because everybody uses that term mentoring, but, there is a need to be a listening board for others and share my experiences for some individuals, especially young women earlier in their career, to say, hey, this is what I've been through. Tell me what you're going through, talk through it. So I am trying to be more purposeful about whether it's a formal or informal mentoring, I don't know, let's not say coaching. Let's just say mentoring and communicating. So I am trying to backfill some of that, my brain space with that. I'm also looking for the next thing to get involved with too. Because you know me, Jim, I'm going to be involved. And so, whether it's, 4-H or, the University of Minnesota, where I graduated from, I'll find the next thing in agriculture to pour my energies into.
Mm-hmm. Did you have to go to your husband and say, hey, you remember me? I'm your wife?
No, because I wasn't gone for long stretches, but it was some different routines again, like, just, getting used to some things that he probably did on his own or I did on his own. But, I will say, for as much as I traveled, as much as was in my brain space, we were very fortunate that we had a space that we could go to a lot of times on Friday night. So about 2020, right during COVID, a couple in town in Easton turned the old hardware store into what's Margaret's Pub. So craft beer, wine. It's an excellent place. People come to the Easton, the town of 177, and say, we can't believe this place is here. So many times on a Friday night, Dale and I would go up to Margaret's Pub and have a beer and pizza and just talk about the week. And, we would laugh and we have great neighbors in a great small town. I love them all. And, we'd talk with them a little bit. They probably had no idea that I had been in Mexico that week, or they had no idea that I'd been in DC. And that's absolutely okay, because for us, it was that Friday night beer and pizza to just sit down and decompress and reconnect. And so that became really important to us. So did we have to reacquaint each other? No, not necessarily, because we did make time, not every Friday night, but as much as we could to just do an event like that to help us connect.
Is that an experience that you share with your younger people you're trying to influence?
I do encourage them to find something to do to connect, to stay connected. I do find, and I have to think back to when I was in that stage of life too, when you're balancing kids and careers and volunteer. It's not easy in those times together. And we did this too. Might be grocery shopping and you're going through the grocery store, but you're sharing your day. But I do try to relate that, to find some time for each other and carve it out, whatever it needs, whatever form it takes. Yeah.
As you work with younger women in particular, do you see that the environment in which they work is more accepting for flexibility than what you and I experienced 20, 30 years ago?
What I see is more women in agriculture. And I think back when I started, which I will date myself and say it will be 40 years in July that I started my job. There weren't many of us in sales. When you went into feed dealerships, there weren't many women there. I always joke that when I went to a meeting, there was no lines for the bathroom, for the women's bathroom. I could get in. Through time, we are seeing more women in colleges, in ag colleges. We are seeing more women in sales roles. I'm seeing more women working in feed dealerships, in agronomy. And so now we need more women in middle management and upper management, so it's going to progress. Is there more flexibility? I don't know if I can judge that, but I know there are more women and there's more acceptance because they're there. Ironically enough, Dale's loan officer and one of his crop consultants is female. So, they're there, and that's great. And like I said, it needs to progress to more management and CEO levels, which it'll get there. But I don't know if it's flexible, but it's certainly, women are more common. They're not outliers.
Well, I'll use my daughter as an example. She had her granddaughter in October, and her boss came to her and said, I don't want to hear from you. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to get an email from you until you're done with your maternity leave. I want you to use all 12 weeks. If there's something important that you need to know, I will let you know. I don't think you and I experienced that 30 years ago.
I would agree. So while it might not be flexibility, I think they're, on a positive manner, it's more of what you stated. There's a realization of that women need to have this time, and it's okay to take that time for family. I would say it's, same for men too. My son took a couple weeks off for when our grandson was born. So I think there's more realization of maybe a separation between work and life. And people like to say the work-life balance and all that. Yeah, fine. I mean, that can be a throwaway term too, but I think there's a more of a separation. I think with the women that I work with, they are trying to be more intentional about saying, okay, when it's work, I'm all in on work, but now it's my family time and I'm all in on family. And so they're making more of a distinction where we probably let it bleed together. I also believe that's because of the role I was in. I was in sales and I worked from my home. So it naturally bled together. I was on a farm. Farm work always bleeds together. So maybe we didn't have those as clear boundaries. But I do believe that, that distinction is being made and more respect for women and for parents, right, in the time that they need with their kids.
I'll be a little more encompassing. I think that there's a better realization in our industry for what employees need to maintain balance, to maintain their ability to work, and their ability to keep their mental health.
Absolutely. Yeah. You see more about it in the workplace. You read more about mental health, especially in our ag publications. You see more of it. And that is a sign of a generational change, right? From the stoic farmers that never wanted to say anything, it's fine. It's fine. If I need something, I'll let you know, it's fine. To saying, no, I need to talk to somebody about this. Yeah.
That's a good thing for our industry.
It's a good thing. Yeah, we've progressed. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
It's a good thing, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, Lori, before we wrap up and we into my last 5 questions, my last question for you is, in your travels with NPPC through your various roles of leadership, what trip or meeting really stuck out with you because you thought you made a big difference for the U.S. producer?
That is a great question. I was fortunate. I've been, to travel to a few different countries. I feel though, and I'll maybe lump them together into one visit. We had an opportunity as officers to talk to the administration. We met with Secretary Rollins, fairly early into her tenure and talked about what we did as farmers. We talked about Prop 12 and things like that. And in a news conference a few days later, a week later, we heard some of our things that we had told her. So I think that was an impact. We've had the opportunity to meet with, the White House and the U.S. trade individuals and talk about trade. We talked about our farms and what they look like now. And that made an impact, right? That individual walked away understanding that farms can be bigger. They're more complex. It's not just the red barn, pitchfork, grandpa and grandma. So, will producers see that? I don't know if exactly. I also do feel that we have a wonderful staff, and I have to give them credit because they are up on the hill all the time and building those relationships. And I would say, especially now, when we're looking at a Farm Bill 2.0 and trying to get that across the line and all the different dynamics that are going on, our staff and their ability to build those relationships, to communicate what we do as farms, to understand how we are structured as farms, big or small, is really key. And I've always felt, and I told the staff this, I was able to do my job better because of them and the work that they've done and who they are.
Well, I think that also plays in what we just talked about how our industry's changed and the checkoff and the voluntary organizations understand that we need to be professional in what we do.
Yes, absolutely. Whether it's the pork industry, whether it's the, the feed industry, think of the people that you've been on. Now I realize I'm dovetailing over here a little bit, but I think it's relative. Like, we all want to think that there's one action that we do, and there's probably some, and I don't know if I'll, it's probably one that somebody else has to come back and say, remember that time when you did that? And you're like, oh, okay. But when you think of the teams and the support people around you, and their ability to help, that is impactful. And once again, it's probably my nature, the collaborative nature, but I really believe that, much of my success, whether it's been in the nutrition business or as president of NPPC, is directly related to the people around me and the teams and the employees that were able to help me with those connections or the situation.
The team you build around you is probably more important than what skills you have individually.
Right. Because I can't know everything.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you're sitting in the old Hubbard building in Mankato or you're sitting on the farm in Graybill, Indiana. Your team is what makes you successful.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
Well, Lori, this has been a great conversation. And I end every one of my podcasts with 5 questions. And I really love the answers because it kind of shows how people think and they're varied, how they worked in ag. What's one lesson you take from ag that you use every day?
One lesson I take from ag that I use every day is that we are fixers and doers, right? In agriculture. I mean, we get in, we roll up our sleeves and we work on stuff. And I think that's important no matter where you're at.
It's a great answer. If you could have coffee with any historical figure in agriculture, who would it be?
Historical figure in agriculture. Wow. That is a tough question because, the first name that popped in my mind was Abraham Lincoln, not necessarily agriculture, although he did start the land grant colleges and that. So,
Then he also signed the Homestead Act, didn't he?
The Homestead Act, yes, which the land grant colleges were part of that. I don't know. I think that is a tough question. I think of some of those people that have invented machines, whether it's combines or tractors. I don't know. I don't know if I have a good answer for that one. Like I said, instinctively, Abraham Lincoln comes to my mind, but I'll go with that.
There you go. What is one quirky or underappreciated thing about agriculture more people should understand?
Quirky or underappreciated thing about agriculture. I believe agriculture, and those of us especially, I'm going to think of it more in the rural area, we really are, a community. But sometimes we are a little standoffish until we know that person well enough to let them into our community. So I think sometimes it appears we may not be as welcoming as we should be, but once we assess the person, the situation, we welcome them in. And there are numerous stories of communities doing work for people because of accidents they've had or deaths or tragedies. And so, agriculture, and especially the rural area, will embrace you, but we probably just need to get to know you a little bit first.
We're kind of like that trust but verify. And once we verify that, come on in.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's our Scandinavian heritage where we're a little standoffish at first, but whatever the case. Yeah.
What's your favorite ag-related tool, product, or innovation?
My favorite ag-related tool, product, or innovation? Gosh, this is hard. These are hard questions, Jim. I don't know. You think of things like lawnmowers and garden tillers and, my husband would probably say it's automated feed lines because then he's not having if we had to haul buckets of feed to all the animals all the time, that would be hard. So I do think it's the automation that we have with our feed lines. I think even now with the technology, with the sensors in there to be able to see temperatures and things like that. I mean, those type of automations, Dale's folks would probably say cabs on tractors. I mean, those type of things that have made life more comfortable and also safer, I think would be what I would mention. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I would modify that just a little bit, where it's not automation as a substitute for human interaction. And that's what you're talking about, the things that make our job easier so that we can still be farmers.
Yeah. Easier and safer. And, if you talk to like Dale's folks and their mom, I mean, the tractors were not comfortable. And, you think of the number of farmers that lost limbs because there was no PTO cover on the shaft, so it's basically basic things like that have made farming more comfortable and safer, but haven't reduced the human interaction.
We are very adaptive and innovative in our industry.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the last question is, what is one small thing or change that can make a big impact on agriculture's future?
Big or small change that can make an impact on agriculture in the future. I'm going to modify that slightly, and it may not be a change, but I would say to keep that human element and to keep the farmer first, with all the things that we've talked about and just talked about, and all the technologies that are going to come, that ability to keep the human side of it. Because at the end of the day, it still is relationships, whether it's the individuals in the barn, and the communications there, whether it's us in the feed industry, even if it integrates even more and becomes more of a bid type situation, it's still about relationships. It's that human element. It's that way at NPPC and the work we do at the trade association, right? At the end of the day, it's the relationship and sitting down from someone, and we can never forget that human element. We can't let that leave the work that we do.
Well, Lori, this has been a great conversation. It's been nice to reconnect and hear about your time at that NPPC.
Yeah, I've enjoyed this. This has been really good. I really appreciate the opportunity to converse with you. So thank you for asking me to be part of your podcast.
Well, you're more than welcome, Lori, and your story is a great one for people to understand the roles that we can have in ag, how we can promote our commodities, and how we can make agriculture better. This is what we expected from Lori Stevermer, a great conversation about the pork industry. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, Jim.